Good evening. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I do hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So we're making our way through the discourse on how to establish right mindfulness. Now, the one in the middle length sayings, the Majjhima Nikaya, that doesn't have the fullness of the Four Noble Truths. For that, I've had to go to another book called The Long Discourses of the Buddha, and they are long. And this one does include the Four Noble Truths. So this is something that you very rarely get. They're presumed in all the literature that you read that the Four Noble Truths are there at the basis. But here we've actually got what the Buddha meant by those Four Noble Truths. Now, as I say, what the Buddha meant and what's actually written here, they've obviously been formalized. So in the earlier part of the scriptures, it's much more informal the way he's teaching. By this time, everything's been formalized into lists, etc. So I'll read through these Four Noble Truths. So this is, remember, in the section on Dhamma, which is translated as mind objects. But as we can see, I think it'd be closer to the mark when we talk about the teachings. So again, a meditator abides contemplating mind objects. And how does he do this? He does in respect to the Four Noble Truths. This is suffering. He knows it as it really is. This is the origin of suffering. He knows it as it really is. This is the cessation of suffering. He knows as it really is, And this is the way of practice leading to the cessation of suffering. And what is this noble truth of suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress are suffering. Being attached to the unloved is suffering. Being separated from the loved is suffering. Not getting what one wants is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates of grasping are suffering. Okay. So then there are definitions of these. For instance, what is birth? Whatever beings, of whatever group of beings, there is birth, coming to be, coming forth, the appearance of the aggregate, so that's a psychophysical organism, the acquisition of the sense bases, the 6 sense bases, including the mind. This is called birth. Aging, whatever beings of whatever group of beings there is aging, decrepitude, broken teeth, gray hair, wrinkled skin, shrinking with age, decay of sense faculties. This is called aging. So he's not bad, is he? He's got it nailed there, I think. And what is death? Whatever beings of whatever group of beings passing away, a removal, a cutting off, a disappearance, a death, a dying, an ending, a cutting off of the aggregates, psychophysical organism, discarding of the body. This is death. So then he describes these words that he's used. What is sorrow? So any kind of misfortune, anyone is affected by something of a painful nature. Sorrow, mourning, distress, inward grief, inward woe, that is called sorrow. Lamentation, whatever any kind of misfortune, anyone is affected by something of a painful nature, and there is crying out, lamenting, making much noise of grief, making great lamentation. This is called lamentation. What is pain? Whatever bodily painful feeling, bodily unpleasant feeling, painful or unpleasant feelings result from bodily contact. This is called pain. And when he says body, of course, it's the whole body, the whole senses, everything. What is sadness? Whatever mental painful feeling, mental unpleasant feeling, painful or unpleasant sensation results in mental contact that is called sadness. And distress, whatever kind of misfortune anyone is affected by something of a painful nature, distress, great distress, affliction with great distress, this is called distress. And not being and what monkey is being attached to the unloved. Here, whoever has unwanted, disliked, unpleasant sight objects, sounds, smells, tastes, tangible or mental objects, or whoever encounters ill wishes, wishes of harm, of discomfort, insecurity, with whom they have concourse, connection, union, this is called attached to the unloved. In other words, when you're stuck with some situation which is highly unpleasant, or some person which you find whom you find unpleasant. And what is the separation from the loved? Here, whoever has what is wanted, liked, pleasant sight objects, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, and mind objects, and whoever encounters well wishers, wishes of good, of comfort, of security, mother or father, brother or sister, or younger kinsmen, or friends, or colleagues, or blood relations, and then is deprived of concourse, connection, and union, that is called separation from the loved. So he's now described that those little adjectives that come at the end of the noble truths. And then he says, what is not getting what one wants. So this is the crux of it, isn't it? And in being subject to birth, this wish arises. Oh, that we were not subject to birth, that we might not come to birth. But this cannot be gained by wishing. This is not getting what one wants. In being subject to aging, to disease, to death, to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress, this wish arises. Oh, that we were not subject to aging, etc. But this cannot be gained by wishing. This is not getting what one wants. And how, monks, in short, are the 5 aggregates of grasping suffering? The aggregate of grasping of form, of feeling, of perception, of mental formations, and consciousness. These, in short, are the 5 aggregates of grasping. So now, remember, the Buddha has this cross-section of human beings, where there's the body, which includes the senses, all the senses, including the mind, the mental base. And then there are all the feelings, both physical and mental feelings that we have in the body. There's all the perception, which then grows into concepts and all that. And when these 2 things are joined, feeling and perception, that's when we start creating these habits, mental habits, physical habits. And all that has to appear upon a screen of consciousness. Now, all that the Buddha did after his awakening. Nothing changed at that level, right? He had a body, he was feeling things, he had perceptions and concepts. I mean, all his teaching is a psychological philosophy or an ethical philosophy. And of course, he's conscious. So nothing has changed. What has changed is the grasping, okay? That's the one thing that's changed. What is this grasping? It's identity. So we did all that at the beginning of this series, if you remember, about the self. It's identifying with this form that creates the initial problem, because with this being me, I'm trying to chase happiness with it. And either I'm getting it and it disappears just when I've got it, or it never stays long enough, or I'm stuck in a situation which is unpleasant. So chasing happiness from the point of view of a self is a fool's game. So that's this whole business of letting go. But we're coming to that. So now the next noble truth, of course, is the origin of suffering. It is that very craving which gives rise to rebirth, bound up with pleasure and lust, finding fresh delight now here, now there. That is to say, sensual craving, craving for existence and craving for non-existence. So if you think about what it is that we crave for, so this craving is again a desire, right? So there's the way they translate these two words, tanha and upadana. So tanha is your initial desire, right? Which can be a craving, unfortunately. And the upadana is the craving which comes about by identification. So I would always prefer to translate them as desire, wrong desire, craving, and identifying, possessing and identifying. So basically the cause of everything is this relationship of wanting happiness from or through this psychophysical organism. And where does this craving arise and establish itself? Wherever in the world there is anything agreeable or pleasant, there this craving arises and establishes itself. And what is there in the world that is agreeable and pleasurable? Now remember, when he's talking about the world at this sort of level, it's not the objective world out there, it's the world we're creating, right? And the world we're creating, of course, is often dependent on information from the outside world, but it's still our world, it's still our little universe. So the world, and what is there in the world that is agreeable and pleasant? Well, anything to do with the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, etc. That's where craving arises and establishes itself. Signs, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, and mind objects in the world are agreeable and pleasurable. And there this craving arises and establishes itself. Okay, so it's obvious that when he says the world, he really means sometimes he talks about in this fathom length body. And of course, it establishes itself also as a consciousness. And then there's a whole section here which touches upon dependent origination, right? So we won't go into that because it's a bit too long, but it's about the initial contact, the feeling that is got from contact. So your contact maybe with a friend, the feeling comes of happiness. Perception, so we have photocopies which then tend to develop into concepts. Then there's the will, the wanting, right? The desire, the volition. And then there's this craving, which is the volition is the energy needed for something to happen. Then there's the craving, and then there's thinking, and they've translated it as thinking and pondering. This is what's his name, Maurice Walsh, who's died. Well, he died a while back actually. Thinking and pondering. So basically, it's your initial ideas and how you're developing them. And of course, all this happens in the objects in the world is agreeable and pleasurable. Now, having established the fact that the fundamental problem that creates all this dissatisfaction, suffering, etc. for us is this desire, this wrong type of desire. He then, of course, can make the statement, there is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the complete fading away and extinction of this craving, this very craving. It's forsaking and abandonment, liberation from it, and detachment from it. And how does this craving come to be abandoned? How does this cessation come to be, right? So in other words, our practice is renunciation. So it's not, remember, it's not self-mortification, not trying to punish ourselves, definitely not trying to punish the body. The body's just doing its thing. It's this constant effort to see where there's a wrong desire and just hold it, then not activate upon it, let it arise and pass away, right? And every time we experience that, and the release, the relief, the unshackling from that desire, and the little bit of joy that arises, right? Even if it's just that lovely equanimity that arises, the peacefulness of a mind which is not agitated, turbulent with desire. That's a little sneaky preview of nibbana. Whatever is agreeable. Let's take a look now. And then he goes through, the consciousness, the eye consciousness, and all that, through all the sights and sounds, etc. Letting go of all that, of contact, and then finally, right, and that is the cessation of suffering. And what, monks, is the noble truth? So this, I'm sure you all know, but even so, right view. What is right view? Well, it is the knowledge of this suffering, the knowledge of the reason or the cause of suffering, the knowledge of the cessation of suffering, and this very practice leading to that cessation. The next one, of course, is right attitude, samasankappa. So some people translate it as right motive, but I just prefer the word attitude. So it's thoughts of ill will. It's actually an attitude of letting go of things, letting go of that desire. Thoughts of non-ill will, which is, of course, it's everything that you don't want to do in order to establish love. And thoughts of harmlessness, which, of course, is just another way of saying compassion. So when he says thoughts of renunciation, it's also a way of saying generosity. So these things always move towards their opposite. See, the more you let go of things, the more you're happy to give. And the more you let go of ill will and hatred and all that sort of silly stuff, the more you are able to love. And the more you let go of harmfulness, harmful thoughts, wishing somebody ill, and the more obviously there's compassion, because all this negative stuff is always being transformed, right? You don't lose anything. It's just energy. It's just energy. It's just thinking and all that, and it's just slowly transforming in towards their opposites. What is right speech? So he always tells us what we shouldn't be doing first. So it's refraining from lying, from slander, from harsh speech. There's a better word than harsh speech. Abusive speech is much better translation. Refraining from frivolous speech as well. But then, of course, as you let go of that, you move towards gentle, truthful, at the right time, and with a heart of loving kindness. So your speech is coming from a different center. It's coming from the good heart. What, monks, is right action? Refraining from taking life, from taking what is not given, from refraining from sexual misconduct. So obviously, if we stop taking life, then we move towards preserving it. If you stop taking what is not freely given, you move towards generosity. And now this karma, it's always translated as sexual misconduct, but it has a wider meaning of indulging the senses. But here, refraining from sexual misconduct, obviously, the proper place for erotic rather than and sexual conduct is within a fulsome relationship. And then what is right livelihood? Well, it basically says to give up wrong livelihood. So it's any livelihood that does harm, and to have right livelihood. Now this is an important thing, because I remember my teacher saying that wasn't necessary because it's included really in right action. But even so, he makes it a special category. And when you think that you spend a lot of your energy, we spend a lot of our energy on the work we do, you can see that it has an effect upon us. So if you're in the say caring professions, then obviously you're developing that sense of care, the sense of compassion. If you're in say policing, then again you're there with a sense of protecting, of trying to stop harm. So that also is compassion, yeah, although it makes you very suspicious, I think. So whatever livelihood you're undertaking, it will have an effect on your character, on the way you experience life. Then the last three, by the way, they often remember the Eightfold Path is put as Sila Samadhi Panya, which is morality, samadhi, meditation and wisdom, and it sort of mixes it the other way around. So, but as it's laid out by the Buddha, it's wisdom and then right conduct, and then finally the meditation. So, right effort rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. In other words, to stop naughty things arising in the mind. And he arouses his will, etc., and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states. So as soon as something that you see as unwholesome come up, then there's the effort to not enjoin it, not develop it, not express it. And then he rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen and not let them fade away. And he does the same. He arouses to produce. The next one is to produce unarisen wholesome states. In other words, always having right intentions which bring up right wholesome mental states, and when they arise, to do our best to maintain them. And what monks is right mindfulness. Now, I did say this was about meditation, but obviously the effort is there in the whole of the path, in what we do, our livelihoods, etc. Right mindfulness is also throughout the day. It's not just when we're sitting. So, but here is it's basically meant as only the meditation, when we're sitting, So that puts us right mindfulness. And right concentration here is really only expressed as the jhana, these absorption states. But obviously, in ordinary daily life, it's keeping your attention on what you're doing. Okay. So then the usual refrain that he contemplates mind objects as mind objects internally and externally, both in, so you can see them in other people, these things. You can see these attitudes and what they're doing, etc. He abides contemplating the arising of mind objects. He abides contemplating the vanishing. So it's the arising and vanishing, both the arising and vanishing. So it's always about seeing process, about seeing that nothing remains, nothing's reliable. Or just this bare attentiveness, as they put it, of something which arises within our consciousness, and just enough so that insight and awareness can arise. And he abides detached. That should be, that's the old way of saying it. You see, this was published in, I don't know, I think it's the 90s or something. And that was the old way of expressing this detachment. Now they say non-attachment. So it's non-dual, right? It's neither attachment nor detachment. It's non-attachment. And monks, this is how you abide, or meditators, this is how you abide, contemplating mind objects. So that completes all these mind objects, the last section, the fourth section of the Satipatthana discourse. But then there's this lovely ending, this conclusion, which hopefully raises possibilities for us. Whoever should practice these four foundations of mindfulness for just 7 years may expect one of two results. Either arahatship, complete liberation from all suffering and the awakening, or if there is some substrate left, you haven't quite made it, then the state of non-returner. Now, the non-returner is that person who is no longer attracted to the sensual life, right? They've gone beyond, but they've not gone so beyond that they're fully liberated. Let alone 7 years, whoever should practice it for just 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year may expect one of two results. Never mind 1 year, whoever practices for 7 months, 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, half a month may expect one of two results. And whoever practices this even for 1 week, can expect one of two results: either full liberation or with the substrate left as a non-returner. And now it was said, this is, and so then having said that, he repeats the original statement that he makes right at the beginning of the discourse. Now, how could you possibly be fully liberated in 1 week, you see? We do have occasions in the scripture where people wake up just like that, you know. I bring, there's the very famous or well-known case, rather, of Bahir the Barkroth, where he basically gives him a few hints and he becomes fully liberated right there and then. There's not time to go into that at the moment. So this 1 week, one presumes that means that from the moment you get up on Monday morning until you get up again, or until you fall asleep the next Sunday evening, that you haven't lost your mindfulness even for 1 second, right? Then we can expect some results. So that's what we're working towards, that. And so finally, this is the one way. Remember, this has got it. They've translated ekayano in various ways, but the one that I prefer is that this is the path of pure vipassana, as opposed to the path where you practice these absorptions and vipassana. So this is the one-way path of purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and distress, for the disappearance of pain and sadness, for the gaining of the right path, for the realization of nibbana, that is to say, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it is for this reason that it has been spoken. Thus spoke the Lord, and the listeners, the monks, and everybody else rejoiced and were delighted at his words, as I'm sure we are too. So that brings to an end our run through the Satipatthana discourse on how to establish right mindfulness. As I say, there are now excellent books on it, which you can read, and you'll find them on the website there, right, on resources. So, time moves on. I trust my words have been of some assistance, not caused too much confusion. May you, by your continuous effort and practice, achieve full liberation sooner rather than later. So we can begin our